Truth, where
Tonight,
you can sit back, relax, and hear an honest dialogue about health, wealth, legal, and social issues. The hosts are Dr. Rogers Kane, family practice physician, and Jocelyn Turner, health education consultant, with co hosts from the Northeast Florida Medical Society and its foundation. Stay tuned for the truth about matters affecting you and your family. We're here to tell you what's really going on and why.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner, as you saw from the wonderful, our wonderful intro that was created by our behind the scenes guy called Tyrone.net. I just love it. Just Dr. Kane, I don't know how you're feeling tonight, but every time I see that intro, I'm just like, oh, we're special, aren't we?
it sounds good. I just need to get that background that you got put on sooner or later. I think I'll make sure Tyrone do that tomorrow when I see him.
Gives you a little tutorial, huh?
Yeah.
On how to
How you
do it.
doing?
I am doing just fantastic. What about you this evening?
I day to day, and I'm good. As long as I wake up with both feet on top of the ground, I am excellent shape.
And this heat, I tell you what, it's just something else. But I'm not gonna. It's not about me at this moment. But I have on my sleeveless top because it's like, oh, it's so hot in Florida today. But we are just so pleased, Dr. Kane, to have joining with us tonight two distinguished pediatricians in Northeast Florida. And I shouldn't limit it to Northeast Florida because these ladies are so awesome. They speak wherever they're asked. They're both active with their sororities and professionally have done so much for our communities, for babies, for children. And we're just so pleased to have them come on tonight to talk about what parents need to know to get their children ready for going back to school. Now, I don't know about you, Dr. Kane, but I don't have any children, but I remember when it was time to go back to school and it was still hot outside. I'm like, it's too early to go back to school. So, back in the day, and yeah, I'm going to date myself and say we didn't go back to school until after Labor Day. So it just seems insane for it to be so hot, Doctors Roll and Pope, that children are going to have to go back to school. So we're going to have to mention something about making sure that your children stay cool. So how are you doing this evening? I'll start with Dr. Roll.
Good evening. I'm so excited to be here tonight. I am doing wonderful. Yeah, it's hot. We all trying to stay cool. But we got to get ready for school, whether you like it or not. It's that time of year, and so we want parents to be prepared as well as their kids. And so we're excited to be here tonight to talk on this topic. Thank you.
While you have the mic, Dr. Rowe, tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a graduate of Fisk University and Meharry Medical College. I trained here at UF Health here in Jacksonville, and I currently work for Ascension. And I am the medical director, or one of the medical directors at Ascension, and previously medical director and health officer for the health department. So love the kids, love the community, and again, this is part of what we do is educate. And so excited to have this opportunity tonight. Thank you. And
Awesome,
also
awesome.
a member of Northeast Florida Medical Society for a number of years. And so thank you again for providing this platform.
And Dr. Kane was going to mention that. So thankfully you beat him to the punch, right? Also joining us tonight is Dr. Akila Pope. Dr. Pope, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing very, very well. Happy to be back with you all on this lovely evening to talk about our wonderful kids, talk about our future and what we should be doing to prepare them as they return back to school this year. And yes, this is fairly early going back as I date myself.
I know it just
Let
seems
me, Miss
insane,
Turner,
right?
Miss Turner, let me just say that, and both of these ladies, for the little short verbiage I'm gonna get this evening, know both of them well. They're excellent physicians. I would take my grandkids these days. Kids are too old. Grandkids to see either one of them, They have been excellent servants to the community. And I got a lot of crossover with both of them, being at the health department, being at UF Health, being at St. Vincent's, being medical director at St. Vincent's. It just goes on and on, but we have a lot of crossover. But what it just shows is just to show how our physicians are really, really concerned about our community. And these ladies, nonetheless, as well as any of them, at the top of the heap.
Thank you, Dr. Kane. And Dr. Pope, before we start the conversation, can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Mike muted.
Whoops, sorry. I was trying to keep the background out because, of course, I guess they're doing some work in my neighborhood today when we're on the show. But I am originally from Memphis, Tennessee. Went to James H. Quillen College of Medicine in Johnson City, Tennessee, and I trained in pediatrics at the Louisiana State University Health Sciences Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, and then moved to Jacksonville, Florida, where I call myself an implant here into the community because I love making sure that our youth are fitted for success in a healthy way.
Fantastic. And we're, again, as Dr. Kane said, we're very pleased to have you both here. So I have to start off with this because for the past year, this is just an area of focus that I have been working on. So I just like to start out by asking, and either one of you can take the question, are children experiencing new health conditions as a result of COVID-19 that you've seen?
Well, in the last few years, and this has been documented, there's been some studies around this. We've seen an increase in diabetes being diagnosed in children. And that's not necessarily just related to COVID, but COVID certainly didn't help. As children were sitting at home, less active, not getting those that playtime outside or being able to interact with friends as much, that was certainly an issue. And the other issue we've seen an increase in is depression and behavioral health related concerns. We're seeing a lot more children with mental health and behavioral health concerns, and they're presenting in all kinds of ways. And some of that, has been attributed to COVID, but we were already seeing increases in these areas prior to COVID. And so it's important for people to understand that COVID just added that extra layer, which caused us to be able to recognize these a little bit more in children. And then also parents were spending more time at home with their kids. And so they were starting to see things that they might not have seen before or noticed before, and now it's coming to light.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Rowe. Definitely diabetes, and then piggybacking off of an increase or drastic increase in obesity from a lack of exercise, going outside, interacting with their peers in the way that they would normally interact with them during organized sports, or even just having play dates that they would normally have, as well as our mental health, as far as anxiety and depression and some even PTSD from the lack of going to school or interacting with others, or wanting to go to school. So they're having a lot of challenges that are coming up directly related to COVID-19.
It'll be interesting to see how, people always talk about how resilient children are. Mm-hmm. It'll be interesting to see how soon they bounce back, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? Because most adults are, they're out and about doing things now, particularly here in Florida. People are resuming normal activities. But you're right, it makes you wonder, children in the organized school setting, have they really bounced back? And maybe there's some researcher out there who's doing some study to see what effects that COVID has had, and really how long they anticipate things getting back to some semblance of normalcy or pre-COVID. Dr. Rowe, were you about to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, yes, children are known to be resilient, but some of that resiliency is based on their environment, and family dynamics. That contributes to the resiliency of children. For a lot of these kids, they experienced a lot of trauma during this time. And also, they watched their parents not be able to necessarily cope with what was happening as it related to COVID-19, loss of jobs, difficulty finding food. When we grew up, stuff was happening in the household we didn't necessarily know about, because our parents didn't expose us to that. If they couldn't afford something, that wasn't always known to us as children. There were a lot of things we were insulated from. Unfortunately, our society today, children are exposed to a lot of things that we weren't necessarily exposed to as children, and it isn't always just their household. It's through social media, it's through family members, and so these things also contribute to how resilient you can be. Again, nurturing home, leading by example helps with that. So there are a lot of factors to contribute to that, including the environment in which a child is dwelling, and whether they already had underlying issues. A person can only take so much at some point. And so we have to have coping strategies in place and support for our children in order for them to be able to bounce back. If they don't have that level of comfort, that level of trust, or ways of coping, it can make it difficult to bounce back or be resilient in any situation.
So it's the weekend before, it's 2 weeks before school starting, almost to the date. What advice would you give parents as they prepare to get their children ready? Now, we don't have to talk about getting the clothes ready, going shopping and all that. I think parents are they're cool with that and getting a backpack and stuff like that. But what are some things you would tell parents right now to start readying their children for going back to school?
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Pope?
So, what we typically start off is saying you need to get your routines back. So, start back with the sleep habits and good sleep hygiene, ensuring that the kids are getting enough sleep. So, 8 to 10 hours a night. For most on average for kids, making sure that that routine is in place, because as we all know, everybody's been up all night playing video games, watching TV, playing with their siblings, having a good old time, but now it's time to get back to business. So making sure the parents are on board with getting those routines back. And then when you think about nutrition, transitioning from the hamburgers and the hot dogs and the sugary foods, but getting them back on the route, right? Getting them back to the routine of eating healthy and being active in the way that they would normally be. Also, organized sports are coming back. So they want to make sure that they're being prepared for that, encouraging their young ones, if they are in organized sports, making sure that they have the right equipment, protective equipment, to make sure that they are being safe as well. So we just want to make sure that routines are back to what we say normal.
Gotcha. Dr. Rule, anything you'd like to add to that?
It's certainly very important, extremely important, and they still have some time to get those routines in place. The other thing is, from a primary care standpoint, we are inundated this time of year with back to school physicals, vaccines, and so we don't want parents to wait to the last minute. Yeah, it's 2 weeks before; it's still not too late. Some parents, blow off the first day of school, say it's not that important, and they're not going to do anything. But really, the first day of school is very important, particularly for a kid that's attending a new school, because it's the time you get to know all of your teachers, you get to gel and meet new friends. By the time you get there the second or third day, everybody's kind of gotten to know everybody a little bit. People have kind of gotten a little comfortable with each other. They already know who the teacher is or what the expectations are. And so you don't want your child to miss out on that. In order for them to be present that first day, they really need to have everything in place. In addition to their supplies and all of that, we need to make sure if they require a school physical that they've gotten that and they've gotten the required vaccines that are needed. The same thing Dr. Pope mentioned about sports and organized sports. A lot of these kids want to play sports, they'll need a sports physical. And you certainly don't want them to miss the first day of tryouts because they did not have their sports physical in place. And so those are things we also encourage parents to think about and get done, make an appointment with their primary care provider to get those things done.
I'd like to ask a quick question. Is there any difference? I mean, because you guys elaborate on a whole lot. There's a lot of stuff I see, and I'm taking care of old folks, but still some of the younger folks still trying to trickle in. Any difference between private school versus public school in terms of some of the requirements that you guys are aware of? I can't comment on it, but I am curious.
So Dr. Pope, you like you were going to say something.
So there may be some difference between a public school system who is pretty much state owned per se, and also private and charter schools as well. So they may or may not require certain school physicals or vaccinations. They may or may not allow certain exemptions per se. So you really want to check with the school that your child attends to make sure that you have all the requirements necessary to be able for that child to attend, like Dr. Rose said, on day one, so that they will not miss out on anything. Another thing that we really want to enforce is if your child has an underlying medical condition or a chronic condition such as asthma or any type of allergic reactions or any type of medications that they may need to take during the school day, the schools will require a medication authorization form to be present at the school in order for them to hold it, to self-carry, as well as to take it. So be mindful of that as you are enrolling your children into the schools.
I will ask one other quick question because you brought it my awareness to it, Dr. Pope.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any kind of a boilerplate template, a checklist that the parents should be looking at, whether it's public or private school, immunizations, the medication checklist that you mentioned, and so on and so on. And we're aware of anywhere where they can go get some of those, get a list of things to make sure that they check off the just kind of reminders for them.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes the elementary school teachers have checklists for those children, and a lot of times the DCPS or Duval County Public School website will have those checklists along with what the school supplies list that are needed as well that they put out. So if you check the DCPS website, that checklist may be there as well.
And if you're in a different, if you happen to be listening, you're in a different county, certainly check your public schools website. For us, it's DCPS. But if you're listening in another county, certainly check your public schools website.
Yes, so I hope you all hear me because my internet seems to be unstable. So I hope you're getting it and I'm not breaking up. But what about students going to college? We seem like we've had a lot of focus on little ones and high school or middle school. What advice would you give to parents, or what do college students need to get back into school, into college, I'll say?
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that. Parents often forget about their college student until it's time for them to go. And it's like, oh my gosh, they need this paperwork filled out. And so it's school dependent for sure, but some schools do require forms to be filled out, a updated physical form and/or a vaccination record. In the last few years, we've seen an uptick in the number of meningitis cases on college campuses, and so a lot of them are actually requiring those vaccines prior to them setting foot on the college campus. And so parents need to know what the requirements are of the college that their child is going to. And oftentimes the university or college will provide the forms needed for school entry. And so it's important for them not to forget that teenager that's going off to school. I've seen it too many times where it's like the week before, they're like, they sent me these papers, we got to get this done. And so it's important for them to remember, don't forget your student going off to college. Certainly you want them to be adequately protected against vaccine preventable diseases, and make sure they have their proper paperwork in place so they can be present the first day.
Well, I'm glad you said that. You mentioned about, because I'm sorry, my public health background, I'm thinking about students who may go to school unprepared, sexually transmitted diseases. Parents need to have that conversation. And if they're uncomfortable about it, Dr. Pope, that's when they can maybe tap into some of your folks at the health department, for example. If I know when I was working at the health department, some parents feel uncomfortable having those conversations with their adult kids going off to college and what have you. What advice would you give them? But, to remind them, it is still important to have that conversation.
Well, Jocelyn, I would advise them, just as you just said, please, please, please make sure you're having those conversations with your college age kids. It's very important that awareness is instilled in these college kids. Of course, they're busy trying to make friends and figure out where they're going on campus, trying to find their classes and just get acclimated. So making sure that you have that sit down conversation with your adults now going into college, making sure that you're talking about sexually transmitted infections and diseases and how they can be prevented. Most importantly, you can, if they don't feel comfortable, which, as you said, a lot do not, you can tap into your or their primary care clinician, their pediatrician. We typically have these conversations with them when they come into their annual visits, or sometimes what we call their well child checkups. And that's why it's very, very important to make sure that children are coming in every single year, because that's why we call it a preventative visit. We catch things beforehand. We advise of things beforehand. We make sure that they're aware of things before they come into contact or hear about certain things. So we want them to be aware of different type of situations that they may be put in.
And hopefully they carry that on into adulthood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if they don't want to end up being a grandparent sooner than they anticipate. But I think one of the things that triggered a thought in my mind, and I remember that was a big deal because, at what age does a teenager stop coming to see either of you and transition to going to see Dr. Kane? Because I can't imagine an 18-year-old male coming to a pediatrician. you're great, but I just can't imagine it.
Well, it depends. And Dr. Roll is laughing because we both know how our patients are. And both, and I don't want to speak for you, but I'm pretty sure I see kids up until 18. But usually if they are a child that I've seen for years and years and years, I will see them up until 21. A lot of my patients get to 18 and they're like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't know who you talking about transitioning me to, but I'm not going. So in order for them to adjust in an appropriate way, I like to keep them until 21 and prepare them better for what's to come in the future when they have to adult and prepare them on what they should be doing.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Dr. Arnold.
No, I agree with Dr. Pope. We usually kind of have to push them out the door, but yeah, as pediatricians, we can see them up to 21, but usually at 18, we try to transition them out. It's not always easy because some of them still want to come, even though they're longer than the bed.
Longer than the bed. Now, that's an interesting way to put it, Dr.
Yes, and
Dr.
the
Arnold.
extension on the bed.
You say the extension?
Yes.
Dr. Kane, you're muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had one adult that pediatrician actually had to kick out of his office, and she was 26, sitting up in a chair, you know, for the little kids sitting up in the chair. And, you know, and she kept trying and kept trying. So finally he sent her my way. I wish he had kept her, but that's a different story.
It's a special relationship, you know, because a lot of these kids we've been seeing since they were babies. And it's hard because we've watched them grow and they're used to us, and you know, they know our little personalities, we know theirs, and so it can be very difficult, but at some point they do have to transition to adult care. And so we usually try to encourage them around 18 to start making that change, certainly. Yeah.
So tonight we're having a conversation about how to prepare for parents, back to school tips for parents. Parents, if you're listening to us or watching, make sure you dial in. We have these wonderful experts ready to answer questions. You can dial in at 1-888-669-1280. And if you're watching, you see it on the screen. Again, it's 888-669-1280. Although Dr. Kane and I love asking the questions, we want to hear from you. So, you know, if you're watching on Facebook, post a question for us, and we will certainly get your questions answered of our guests. Dr. Pope, were you about to say something?
Well, yes, I was just going to say you'll be surprised at what our youth and young adults actually divulge to us and how comfortable they are with speaking to us because of the relationships that we have with them. So as Dr. Rose said, it is a special relationship. It is kind of hard to even let them go and fly as an adult as
they
well.
Really trust you guys.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you find that more so with female patients versus male, or both?
It's equal.
No, it's both.
Really?
It's both. It's both. Both. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
And you know, we know how to have those hard conversations with the parents that maybe they needed to have and couldn't. And so we're, you know, as pediatricians, we're not just the doc, we're also sometimes the social worker, the preacher, the pastor, whoever we need to be. And Dr. Kane probably experiences that in his own practice. He probably experiences that with his adult patients. You're sometimes even the family member, because they trust you like they trust family. And so you feel different roles in different patients' lives. And so as they age, it's a little bit hard because they remember when and you remember when.
Well, you treat them like you would your family member. You know, my patients trust me just like yours trust you. It's because whatever you do for them, you do the same thing for your family member, given the exact same circumstances.
Exactly. And that's so important because, you know, one of the things about transitioning from childhood to adulthood too, healthcare is a very scary world to some extent. It's not always easy to navigate. There are a lot of moving parts. And if you're going off to college and you don't have mom and dad there, it's like, well, how do I access services? What do I do? And folks aren't always friendly or forthcoming with information. And so it can be very difficult to navigate for an adult. So just imagine for a young person who's going into the adult world. And so, you know, being the pediatrician, we've helped them navigate all of that all those years. And now they kind of have to do it for themselves. And so that can be difficult for some.
Yeah. So
how many times they call you guys back from Tallahassee or Miami, and they want that advice, and especially before COVID hit and Zoom became so popular. Well, you know, but now that Zoom is here, it's a lot easier, but boy, was it really difficult. How do you handle that these days?
Well, what I was going to say, before they go to college, or when they come to you to get that last physical or their college physical and vaccinations, that's the time to help them navigate. So if they need to find a primary care physician, if there's somebody who's healthy, and you know that they just need to be seen in the next year, that's fine. But it's always good to make sure to inform that emergencies do happen. So this is where you can go if you need assistance. I always tell my parents to make sure that they find, the closest hospital, the closest urgent care center. If they have chronic illnesses, go ahead and talk to their specialist and have them to recommend a specialist that's in that city where the child is going for college, so that they have that access directly.
You really hit on something that, as a member of the Northeast Florida Medical Society, that I have a lot of times that physicians call me and ask me, do I know a person in this city or that city? And a lot of times I may call one of you guys and say, hey, I don't know anybody. Or I may put it out. And these days it's getting a lot easier to be able to do that. But put it out there. Do anybody know anybody in this city that can carry on with this kind of relationship? So I'm glad you mentioned that, because we're out, again, we're there to help. And so y'all keep up the good work.
Dr. Pope, I want to get back to a question, something that you mentioned earlier. You were talking about childhood obesity. And I know you've been on the show and we've talked about it in the past. What advice would you give for parents who are struggling to get their children to lose weight, and how can the family not make it just about the child, but adopt a healthy lifestyle for the entire family?
So first of all, I would tell them to, and encourage them to take their time, and take it one step at a time. One thing I encourage my parents and my patients, and tell them, is that this is a family issue. This is not just the child's issue, because the child has to depend on the parents in order to be fed, in order to purchase the food that is going in everybody's mouths. More than likely, the parents are doing the cooking or the purchasing of the food at fast food restaurants or any type of restaurant that they go to, or sending food to childcare centers or to grandma's house. So I tell them to take it one step at a time. Typically, I encourage them to try to choose one thing that they want to work on, and then follow back up with me, so we can be accountable for each other, me taking care of the patient as well as them following the instructions or the plan of action that we have provided. So something as simple as only one, let's just say one soda per week versus one Mountain Dew per day. And let's start there, and let's see what happens over the next 4 weeks, and let's see how well you did. And then encourage the parents to be encouraging to their children as well, and make it a competition if they want to. Make it fun for the children to be able to transition into a healthier lifestyle. And let's not say, oh, we're dieting, or this is a diet. No, this is a healthy way of eating. We're eating healthy, or we're clean eating, to make sure that our health and wellness for our body is good.
One of the things that I do
Thank you.
also, I was
Go
going to
ahead,
say,
Dr. Roll.
one of the things I do also when working with families who are obese, it's not just the child's issue, it's the family issue, as Dr. Pope stated. The other thing is I encourage physical fitness and not necessarily weight loss. Weight loss is very difficult to accomplish. You can accomplish it. We see people do it all the time. But sometimes folks get so focused on that scale that they lose sight of the goal. the goal is physical fitness, to eat better, move more, eat less, really. And so I try to get them to focus on physical fitness. And if you focus on physical fitness, the weight loss will come. And the muscle building will come. Like, for example, I tell kids, if you're walking a flight of stairs now and you're out of breath by the time you get to that flight of stairs, let's see if within the next week or two we can be better at that and not be so out of breath, or maybe even do 2 flights of stairs and just increase the number of flights. If you're walking a mile now and you're out of breath, okay, let's keep walking that mile until we're no longer out of breath. And then let's go ahead and increase to 2 miles, 3 miles, and just continue to set small goals for yourself. If that in and of itself gets them, it helps to get them in the direction they need to be going without such a focus on weight. Yes, we recognize the need for folks to lose weight and all that, but sometimes that becomes such an obsession for people. And when they don't see that needle move the way they want it to move, it can often be defeating. The other thing is, when you start to gain muscle mass, muscle weighs more. And so certainly, if you're gaining muscle mass, the scale may not move the way you want it to move. And so again, physical fitness is usually what I emphasize over weight loss. And eating right. You can have more gains with slight changes in your nutrition than you can over exercise. Yes, you do them in combination, but nutrition by itself is at least 50% of the problem. And in some cases, it's almost all of the problem, because we've seen people who say they walk every day, but they're not really making many gains or whatever. That's because they're taking all those calories back in. So we got to have that balance, but certainly I think it's important for families to focus on physical fitness as a family. As parents, lead by example. When your kids are younger, it's easier to do that. And you set those goals and those habits when they're young. So when they get to be teenagers and young adults, that's already ingrained in them.
So let's
Yeah,
talk a
it
little bit
reminds us
about
when we
parents
were
of,
younger, and the one thing that our parents would always do, and I mean, it's kind of hot out there now, but they would send us outside, go outside and play. I don't care how hot it was. It could be high noon. They tell you to go outside and play, and it's too hot out there. We'll find something to do. Okay, because they encourage not only eating a pretty good diet at the time, because they had to eat whatever was at the table, but they also encouraged that physical activity. They made you go out and do that activity. Of course, with the changes in society and technology and all this other stuff, we're a lot less likely to be able to get our. I'm not going to be able to. Our kids are more likely not to get exercise because they're tied to the same thing you and all 4 of us are looking at, that computer screen. So,
yeah. The other thing is, for some, they don't feel like their neighborhood is safe enough to do these things. So that also plays a part too. If you feel like you live in a neighborhood that's not walkable, there are not sidewalks, dogs are always out, or there's crime or whatever, you can certainly find somewhere else to go, like the nearest mall. Like, leave your pocketbook in the car, but walk the mall. That's a way to do it. Like, there are parks, there are public parks that folks can go to. There are trails here in Jacksonville, and certainly all over the country. There are trails people can walk in public parks that they can go to. There are options out there should your neighborhood not be, as far as you're concerned, be safe enough to actually get out and exercise in.
So I think about, and one of you mentioned it earlier, a lot of children go to school every day, or no, let me take that back. A lot of children, unfortunately, have special health conditions. And of course, it doesn't matter. Their parents still want them to receive an education and go to school with all other children. So if this is new to parents, if their child last year did not have a special medical condition, but now that child is going back to school with a particular health condition, you mentioned about a form, but is there a conversation that they need to have with their doctor, or is that a conversation they have with the school, or both?
That's a conversation more than likely the doctor will have with the parent and the child to inform them, or to tell them to inform the school or either the teacher, depending on if it's elementary versus middle or high school, so that they can have an individualized health plan. And that's what you will see in the school systems. So there are school health nurses, there are people that the school deems as individuals to make sure that these plans are in place, and make sure that they sit down, have a conversation with the parents and the child in order to come up with a plan of action, just in case anything is needed, whether it's medication or what to do if there's an emergency, or if there's a flare up of that illness that they have. So yes, usually we as pediatricians or physicians will inform the parents to have that conversation, so everyone is aware of the condition.
You guys brought up a very good point, and because I do have a special needs grandson, and then I got some in terms of being on the spectrum, and as well as a granddaughter that got some certain medical conditions. And even though I'm speaking as a granddad, I guess I'm just a doling granddad that was concerned about his babies and his babies. Anyway, long story short, that's one of the difficulties I see parents have navigating as far as trying to be sure that they can get to school and to accommodate the special needs for their kids. Anything in particular that can, and I guess I keep thinking about checklists and stuff that's trying to help these parents. Maybe there's some certain state agencies they need to contact to help help accommodate these kids. You know, if they're ADHD and so on and so on. I think you guys get the drift of what I'm trying to get to, and you may be able to answer. Hopefully, I asked it well enough for at least to draw you guys in.
So the parent can certainly start the conversation with the primary care provider. In some cases, the child may need an individualized educational plan or a 504 plan if they have learning difficulties, and the physician can engage them in that conversation. But also having that conversation with the school, understanding the limitations here. I always encourage parents to be an advocate for your child. You have to stay engaged. You have to stay involved. There are limited resources, and everybody always talk about being short-staffed, underpaid, all that kind of stuff. It goes beyond that. The resources are limited, and we have so many kids who need services. And so I say to the parents, engage, activate, ask questions. And sometimes parents don't know the questions to ask. And so that's where a conversation with your primary care provider can be helpful. But hey, your kid has a learning disability, or you have some other concern regarding their ability to process the information they're learning at school. You can certainly initiate that conversation with your primary care provider, but also schools have counselors and things of that nature. Having those conversations and following up and following through. Oftentimes your child is one of 100,000 that are in need of the same services. And really, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. That parent who's there, who's engaged, who returns the forms on time, who calls, who follows up, that is the one that tends to get the services that are needed. You have full service schools here in Jacksonville and throughout the state that provide wraparound services for children. Sometimes parents don't know what's available to them. But sometimes by going to the school, you're one of those parents they know that your child needs additional assistance, and you're engaged and you're involved. You ask questions, you're appropriate. You're not going there yelling and screaming, saying my kid needs X. You're going in as a concerned parent. A lot of times the schools can help you navigate that system. Here in Duval and really across Florida, they have implemented a lot of mental health services. They have mental health counselors in every school, and they have tried to do a great job of servicing all the children. However, understand, in any system as large as some of our county school systems are, if you don't feel like you're getting what you need, you got to speak up. You got to have the conversations. And I tell parents, don't wait till your child is a grade level behind. before you start asking those questions. And again, your primary care provider, pediatrician, can provide some guidance with those things. I had a long conversation with a parent this week. They were new to the city. And I just gave them a list of things. These are the things you need to ask. These are some of the things you need to do. Understand that your child is your responsibility at the end of the day. The school system is there to assist, but again, you have to be engaged.
Dr. Rowe, one of the things I for sure heard from you was early engagement, not last minute engagement.
Yes.
And the squeak, like you say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And if you do early engagement, you stay engaged, your child is more likely to get the things that they need than the one who wait to the last minute and no more resources are available. So early engagement from day one. Talk to your primary care physician, one of you smart guys and people like yourselves. Talk to them and find out how to move forward. I'm sorry, Dr. Pope, did you have anything to add to that?
Before Dr. Pope makes a comment, one thing Dr. Rose said, the early bird, whatever that saying goes, squeaky wheel, whatever it is, this is your opportunity, parents. If you're watching, if you're listening, dial in, ask your questions now. 888-669-1280.
The early bird gets the
888-669-1280.
squeaky wheel.
How often do you get an opportunity to ask pediatrician questions that sometimes you may have forgotten to ask your own child's doctor the last time you were in? One thing Dr. Rowe mentioned is a new parent. If you're new to the city, there may be things, or you're just a new parent, period, and have a child entering school for the first time, making sure you understand the things that you need to know from the pediatrician's perspective in taking your child to school. So I just wanted to toss that out. Go ahead, Dr. Pope.
So a couple of things. As Dr. Rose said, be persistent, and make sure if someone is giving you instructions, make sure you're following them and following through. If you see that you are hitting a roadblock per se, let's just say you're not getting anywhere with the actual teacher, then go to the principal. If you're not getting anywhere with the principal, then go to the school board, because there is assistance and resources. We just need to find the people who know where those resources are. So yes, indeed, please be an advocate for your child. Secondly, as Jocelyn just mentioned, most parents have questions, but they may not remember them. They may forget them. Mm-hmm. As you think of them, make a list. I have teenagers now that come in and they come in with a sheet of paper. Oh, Dr. Pope, here's my list of stuff that I need to go through with you. So parents can do the same thing, because you think about stuff as they come up during your daily activities. So go ahead and write those down. So when you get to your primary care clinician, you can ask them those questions that you have written down, and we're able to, even if we don't know the answers, we can even go to our resources to find out and return a phone call or do a referral to an outside agency that can assist you in what you may or may not need.
So we've been talking for the past 50 minutes, really wanting to explore a lot of things that parents need to consider as they prepare their children to go back to school. What are the things that we have not? I know we've been tossing out questions to you, to both of you, but what are some other things that you can think of in terms of some advice that we should really talk about to get those children ready to start back for what I call a successful school year for each individual child?
So a couple of things that I always talk to my parents about for younger children, that 4, 5, 6-year-old who's going into kindergarten or first grade. Really be mindful that this is new to this child, and they don't know this environment, so they are going to be adjusting. So number one, stranger danger. I still use that, stranger danger. So making sure that they are informing their kids, talking to their kids, telling them who they can and cannot talk to, and making sure that they have somebody, whether it's the teacher, the principal, or point out somebody who the child feels comfortable with, and know that the parent is comfortable with the child going to and telling them, hey, this is something that's going wrong, or this is how I feel, or I need some assistance, or I need to ask a question. Point that person out to the child so that they're not having to second guess or look around or figure out anything. And then secondly, good touch and bad touch. We still talk about that. So there are predators in the world, as we all know. We want our young children to be aware of what's going on and aware of the privacy of their own body and who should be touching them and how. So making sure they're aware of that.
Wow. You brought up some things I just hadn't thought about. Go ahead, Dr. Roll.
Extremely important, extremely important. Also, teaching their phone number and their address. We live in a digital world. A lot of these kids don't know their phone numbers. What happens if they, first of all, don't have a cell phone, or if they lose it, or they're somewhere and they need to get in touch with you? If you haven't taught them your phone number and address, they won't have a way of contacting you as a parent. And so I think that's important even in the digital world. There's some basics, like they need to know their parent's number and maybe a close friend or family member that they can contact. They also need to know their address. We have a lot of kids that don't know that information because everything is so digital and we have our contacts in our hands. But there, anything could happen. They could leave that phone on the playground and never see it again. So we want to make sure they have that information handy. And that kind of goes along with the stranger danger type thing. If they can get to, we don't have pay phones on the street anymore, but if a kid runs away from somebody they deem to be dangerous and they get to a store and they ask to use the phone, well, how do they get you? So I usually recommend that as well.
And I'm glad you guys brought that up because that was one of the things we made sure our kids knew: your address, telephone number, name of your mom and dad. That was one thing that was required, and it's so basic that we may tend to overlook it. And then in addition, and then this brought this up because you guys went down that road. This whole gun violence is what, particularly when it comes to school shootings and stuff like that. Anybody, and I mean, we can do a whole separate show on that type of stuff if need be. But anything for a quick look at advising parents who are fearful these days of the whole thing that they see on the news media regarding school shootings, blah, 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 blah. That type of stuff. Anything you guys want to discuss on that or talk about?
Well, go ahead, Dr. Pope.
I would advise the parent to have a conversation with the teacher, the principal, or the school system about their policies and procedures, whether it's fire drills, active shooter procedures. Make sure that they are aware, and if they can get it in writing, then that is good too, because they can practice those procedures and protocols at home with the child so that they are aware of what to do if they are in that type of situation.
Dr. Rowe?
And unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of this. But I encourage parents not to be fearful of sending your child to school. As much as we see on TV, these things are still, when you look at how many people live in this country and how many cities we have, and how many schools we have, it is still kind of wide, far and few between to some extent. When they happen, they're really horrible. They impact us, yes. But please don't let that impact your child's ability to get an education. And as Dr. Pope said, I agree, certainly making sure you understand the plan at the school and having a family plan should something happen. Where are we going to meet? What's the expectation? What you should be doing? It's easy if it's not just school, it's just about anywhere we go nowadays that we're somewhat at risk. And so the question becomes, if you're in an environment, you're at a party or in a school event or something, how do we handle those situations if we're there together as a family? And so having those conversations, much like you have a fire plan at home, how to escape your home in case of a fire, you kind of need to prepare your family for case scenarios, however they happen, and how you should carry yourself.
I know we're getting close to the end of the hour, but I have to at least bring this up, Ms. Turner. The at-home schooling. Anything you guys want to discuss regarding that? Have a direction you want to go with.
It's really an individual choice. Some parents are really good at it and do a great job. Some parents are not so good at it. Know your limitations. And again, evaluate why you decided to homeschool. Is it because you feel like they weren't getting an adequate education where they were? Or is there something else that's driving that? But make sure if you're going to homeschool, you stay on top of your child and those assignments. Unfortunately, sometimes what we see is the parent has left the kid to their own devices, particularly if they're doing virtual school. And they find out mid-semester or end of semester that the kid is failing. And it's a little bit late to try and correct that. So if you're going to homeschool, particularly if they're doing virtual school, stay engaged, stay involved, check in. A lot of the teachers, particularly on virtual school, will have a regular phone call with the parents. And they'll have check-in with the parents, or they'll send emails. They'll ask you how you wish to be communicated with. And they will usually stay in contact with you, but you gotta be engaged. You can't be an absentee parent when you're homeschooling your child.
Dr. Pope, anything to add?
Well, what I would say is, as she said, as far as the parents, some are good and some may not be as good. Well, the same goes for the child. Some flourish with virtual and at-home schooling, but others don't, and they need to interact with other children, and that's the way that they learn best. But there may be children who get distracted or have poor attention, and that virtual at-home schooling is better for them, and they flourish in that environment. But as Dr. Rose said, making sure that the parent is doing like a weekly or bi-weekly check-in so that they don't find out, a month and a half down the line that these 50 assignments weren't done when they should be done. But they do have progressive assignments, so they can check in and see where the child is and how far they've gone. They can also make schedules for the child and goals for the child, making sure that they finish a certain amount of work by the end of the week or either by the end of the day, depending on how strict they want to be, so that they're finished with that curriculum by the end of that semester.
Now, I know Ms. Turner, the host that she is going to look at making sure that we looking at our time, but I cannot bypass these two subject matters. And may be brief, and we're still going to go ahead and look at doing additional shows. COVID and monkeypox. Anything.
We knew that was coming, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So COVID is still out there.
Absolutely.
And we have to learn to live with COVID. It's not going anywhere. It is what it is. And it's really, at this point, it's parental choice whether a child wears a mask or not. Just understanding the younger your kid is, the less likely they're going to be to wear that mask if nobody else is wearing it. Of course, we encourage vaccination. And again, that's a very personal choice. But vaccines are available for kids 6 months and up. So it is one way to protect. Certainly, masks are another way to protect. And reality is there's still a whole host of other diseases that are still out there. I mean, kids were getting sick with all kinds of stuff even before COVID. Mm-hmm. And so let's be real here. When school starts, we can expect that, kids are being exposed to germs that they hadn't been exposed to in months. And so now all of a sudden they got the sniffles. While everything is not COVID, we still need to keep that in the back of our minds. With monkeypox, they've had one, I think one case in a child at this point. It is, expected at this point to increase in terms of numbers. Just, if you have any concerns, make sure you follow up with your primary care provider. Don't send your kid to school sick. I'm going to say that, and I'm going to say it again. Do not send your child to school sick, even if it's just something as simple as a runny nose or cough, because that by itself could be COVID. And meanwhile, they've spread it to everyone. And don't give them Tylenol or Motrin and send them out the door either. So just, we know parents do that, but make sure that do your diligence to help protect your household as well as others.
Just to add on to that, mitigating measures and universal precautions. Hand washing, wash your hands. Sanitize everything, spray. As she said, you can make your own choice on if you want to wear a mask or not, to protect others first and then to protect yourselves, and making sure you're using tissue instead of wiping your hands, wiping your nose with your hands, and then of course coughing in your elbow. The appropriate ways to cough and sneeze, and making sure that hygiene is in place. But mitigating measures are always very helpful: social distancing, hygiene, hand washing, and sanitizing.
Not even an Uber driver will let you in their car if you have sick symptoms. So don't send your kids to school if you can't put them in an Uber.
Right. And thank you to Dr. Barbell Johnson for saying family plans are important. And I like that one of the doctors said that really having a plan if something happens. And Dr. Kane, you even reminded, I remember jokingly, somebody said they asked a little child, what's their mom name? And they said mommy. That's all they knew. They didn't know their mother's name. So teaching those things that you think are not important or that you assume that your children know, but teaching your children those basic things. So we are at the end of the hour. We've had a great discussion on back to school tips for parents. I know it was a lot to take in. The information or the rebroadcast of the podcast is going to be available within the hour after we finish the show. So make sure that you share the content or share this particular podcast for your friends and family who may not have seen it. And also look on our website for previous shows that we've talked about. But we always like to give our guests the opportunity to share their final thoughts. I started with Dr. Roll, so I'm going to start with Dr. Pope this time. Dr. Pope, what are your final thoughts to parents as they prepare their children for going back to school?
My final thoughts, just be encouraging and be supportive, be your child's advocate, as Dr. Rose said earlier. Make sure they're prepared early. Make sure you have everything that's necessary so that they can go to school on day one, and just be a source of support for your child.
Thank you. Dr. Roll?
School should be exciting. We've gotten caught up in worrying about a whole lot of other things, but really think back to your childhood and how exciting the first day of school was. Fresh pressed clothes, new gear. Make it exciting. Cheer your child on. Make it the best experience it can be, because you never get another first day of school for that school year. So make it the best you can be, and have a family plan, and just make sure you make time for you and your family.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Roll. Thank you, Dr. Pope. Dr. Kane, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, I've very much enjoyed these ladies. I've learned quite a bit, even as a physician, as a grandfather, as a old parent, but as a grandfather, as a physician, as an educator to some degree. These ladies have really taught me a lot. I can't wait to get them back and let them, I'm going to do them a favor and let them pick and choose what they want to come back and talk about at this point on the next show. And I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. I can only imagine what our audience have learned, and I thought I knew a little bit.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kane. And you're right. I believe that the doctors share some good advice for parents as they prepare their children to go back to school. As Dr. Rose says, make going back to school fun. Get your children excited. Although there are so many things to worry about, like Dr. Kane brought up monkeypox and COVID, and unfortunately with school shootings, we still want to focus on the positive aspects of learning and really get your children, not just get the shoe shiny and the clothes crisply pressed, but also getting them back to a schedule, as Dr. Pope said, a routine, putting them to bed at an earlier hour. They had the summer to kind of goof off, go beyond the normal hour. Make sure that you have people in place to, if your child needs to be picked up early from school, if you don't have the type of job to get off and run and get them, if you need to have folks in place and on file at the school. I was surprised one day when one of my friends called me and asked me if I would go and pick her child up from school. And I told her, I said, are you going to call them and let them know? She said, oh, you're already on the list. I'm like, what? Who knew? Right. And so I was already on the list as a authorized person to pick up her son. He's an adult now. He probably laugh about that, but I think that is something important that we don't think about. I appreciate you both and all that you're doing for our children here in Northeast Florida. Keep up the good work. Thank you for joining us tonight. To all of our listeners, again, the show will be available within an hour. Give our behind the scenes guru, Tyrone Jackson, the opportunity to do his thing with the technology aspect. The show will be available. Please take a look at it, share it with folks, because we do want to make sure that our children are prepared to go back to school. And stay tuned next week for Pause for the Truth as and Tyrone put up his information. Call Tyrone.net, pardon me, for all of your technological needs. But stay tuned next week as we continue the discussion, or another discussion, on how to help folks really stay tuned with what's going on. And because right here is what we say at Pause for the Truth, we'd like to tell you what's really going on and why. Good evening, everyone.